calling the meeting to order and start off with any amendments to the agenda. All right, hearing none, we'll move on to citizens speak, and I see we have a couple of citizens. And actually, before I do that, I guess I'm going to go ahead and acknowledge tonight. This is our first run as an SAU doing a podcast taping. Is that what we call it?
Sure.
And Mark, is there anything else you want to say about it? Thank you for getting all this set up.
Yeah.
We appreciate you keeping it going, and I guess we'll be the guinea pigs.
Yes.
Is there anything else we should say about that?
Only that Mark told me today that he checked the website, and we don't know of any other school districts in the state of New Hampshire that are using this technology yet. So you really are the very first.
Cutting edge.
And that it would be on the website. I don't know if you did the last one, which was just audio. Same thing. You'll just have a link to click on, and it'll play the video.
A link from the SAU web. I mean, from the
right now from the SAU website.
SAU.
If we're going to do more things with students and classroom teachers, we talked about perhaps having Henniker have their own blog. Yeah. But right now we're taking it one step at a time. So.
Great. All right. Well, thank you for helping get this going. So, for the two of you in the audience, you didn't check off if you wish to speak or not. Then now's the time if you'd like to say anything at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay, I saw the agenda. You want to go first?
Go ahead.
Scott? Okay.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I saw the agenda posted. It mentioned, citizens speaking, inviting comments on the budget. I haven't seen the budget, but I just wanted to know if class size is a factor that's being used in the budget, and if you've arrived at a class size, a target or a maximum class size.
Well, without any discussion amongst the board members, I can tell you that we do have the guidelines for class size that we go by, and that's, I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, but we'll be referencing that when we finalize the budget, and the board will be taking that into consideration certainly in our discussions regarding the budget. We have a draft budget that's being presented to us and to in public tonight, and they'll be walking through that with us, administration. So if you're going to be staying for the evening, you can hear some of that, and then you have an opportunity later on to comment or ask questions.
Okay, thanks.
And then we do have a protocol that we put out for the public. The next meeting, beginning of the next meeting, we're going to have a sort of an informal opportunity. We'll have a screen and walk through the budget in a more formalized manner. So this is just the very first draft that will be presented tonight. So the board is pretty much, we got the materials a few days ago, and we've looked at it, but we haven't had a chance to really deliberate or anything like that. So.
Well, I guess since you're kind of talking about a budget issue, I was reading through the minutes, and are we having 3 teachers or 2 teachers retire? Because there seems to be a conflict. One was withdrawn and then re-added. So are there 2 teachers retiring? 2. So the minutes are in error. Or did they changed?
There was one acted on, Stephanie, that was actually for the end of next year, not the end of this year.
Okay, so that's, okay.
So there were 2 for the end of this year and then 1.
That one's, okay, got it. Okay,
For the 0708.
okay, thank you. So that will impact the budget too.
Okay, then we'll move on to the minutes dated November 1st. Everybody's had a chance to look at those, I'm assuming. Would like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes dated November 1st, 2006.
Second.
Any discussion? Any discussion on the minutes? Okay. All in favor of accepting the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, unanimous, passed. Moving on to communications. There's under communications a tax rate memo.
And Jim will speak to that as soon as he is
It's the standard, out of the board package, it's the standard memorandum that's done after the tax rate is set. And I think most of us have talked about this personally, and probably had a chance to read it. As you know, the overall tax rate in Henniker went down this past year by 18 cents. Schools, local school tax rate went down by 9 cents, and that was essentially, as the memo says, a decrease in the Henniker side of the local school tax rate, down 34 cents from 2005, and a 25-cent decrease on the John Stark side. For overall, the local school tax rate going down to $14 from $14.09. As you all recall, that was pretty much it because our budget last year, we took and did attritions and building the 06-07 budget and lowered the budget through attrition and through staff changes. And we had a good fund balance to go back to help soften the tax rates. It was built for 06-07, built from surplus revenues, extra revenues, and from being under budget on the appropriation side. We talked about that at the time that we signed the MS-25 at the year-end reports and so forth. It sort of sets the stage. You might want to pull this out of your budget, out of your board packages and put it in your budget books. It's always a good reference point as the budget season goes on. The net assessed valuation, as you can see in the town, grew from $387.9 million, almost $380 million to $393 million. $5 million. In the past, the Henniker had thought that if you had a 1% growth in value of the town, that was what they targeted for the next year. And so the 06 tax rate setting was a little ahead of that 1%. So that'll be another number that as we start building the 07, 08 rate, is to sort of talk with the town and say, what are you going to project for the next year as we sort of use the same assessed valuation and project the tax rate. So it helps to sharpen our focus as we move into budget season. Questions?
I have a question. If we compare the tax rate to other towns, it's going to depend on the net assessed valuation. Like we were just reassessed as a community.
Right. The State Department of Revenue does a ranking, essentially, of comparing equalized value. So it takes out every town in the state and tries to determine under their formula what market value is for every state, and it looks at equalized value tax rate per town. As probably most of you know, Henniker is one of the higher taxed towns in the state of New Hampshire. At one time, I think it was fifth. I don't know if the current is still there. It's always been very high in terms of tax effort.
But equalized is different than local.
Equalized is essentially bringing all the towns to compare them up to a market value, to a 100% valuation. Henniker was just reappraised here a year ago, so it's a 100% valuation, where it just was reappraised. So I'm sure we're sort of slipping back down where there was an equalization rate. It's probably 90% or something.
The reason I ask is I saw in the paper there was a listing of all the tax rates across the state, and they had it by local, town, education tax, and all that. And they vary really quite a bit. And I think it's because some towns haven't been reevaluated.
Is it just tax rate, or is it equalized tax rate?
It's tax rate.
Actual
So it's hard to
tax rate,
compare
yeah.
apples to
That's
apples.
right. Yeah.
When you look at something like
Yeah,
that. Right?
exactly. You need to know what whether town's just been recently reappraised, so their rate drops, or whether they haven't been reappraised for a decade, and so the rate might be high, but the tax burden might be actually low.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, or the tax burden might be really high, even though the taxes are low, because all the houses are worth $1 million to $2 million.
But we know we're comparing apples to apples from 2005 to 2006 in Henniker, right?
Right.
Yeah. And it went down a little bit, so that's positive.
No, it's negative. My question is, when you're looking at like a raise, say we need to appropriate $100,000, what's that impact on the tax?
Well, using the 2006 net assessed valuation, for every $393,461 raised in budget, you impact your tax rate dollar.
Okay, so sort of for purposes of simple math, 25% is $100,000. Yes or no?
Yeah,
25 cents.
Yeah, for simple math, a quarter of the tax rate would be $100,000 raised. You have Bill, he said, should we fund it for $100,000? It's 25 cents on the tax rate. For a broad brush, but put him ready one.
That helps me.
Any other questions from him? Thank you, Jim. That will be helpful when we look at our budget process and the impact on the taxes. All right, we'll move on to persons scheduled to appear before the board, and I don't believe there is any. It's not on the agenda. Committee reports will be next. Do we have anything with transportation or quick plan, policy and procedure? Lisa? Is there any?
No.
Okay. I think we're going to breeze right through these. Facilities, nothing new at this point. And technology, I know you've all been working on.
Yeah, nothing new, but I just always want to make sure that I mention that and bring to the forefront that Ed 306 has a requirement in it that's going to sort of up the expectation for our technology and the use of technology. And we do have a group of aging computers, about 149, which according to next year's classification by the state, they will fall out of our ability to be able to count them. But we're in good stead if we sort of go forward with that plan that we had for purchasing computers over time. So continuing with that's going to put us in a good place.
Is that built into the budget, the plan that you're
is.
referring to?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, any questions to Don? All right, thanks, Don. We'll move on to principal's report. Everybody has a copy of it. Any questions for Pam on the principal's report? Well, Pam, is there anything else you want to highlight on the report?
I guess I'd just highlight that we did our first set of report cards on Power School on Friday for the trimester, and you should have had them mailed home. Trimester ended, report cards were mailed at 4 o'clock on Friday. So we feel pretty good about it. It was a big push, but that means that parents got timely reporting of student progress. It didn't take a week or two to know where they stood.
They were very easy to read. I thought they looked great.
Sometimes those little zeros that showed up, we figured out how to take care of those. They won't be there. The other thing is something that's been of concern to people for a time, and that's the growing cost of the Washington trip and environmental camp. And we chose a new fundraiser for our 5th and 6th graders. We actually have students who've already completely paid for environmental camp and have money saved towards Washington, D.C. By this new fundraiser, so it's been pretty successful.
We were thinking more for the 7th graders in this right.
That's good. Good news.
And that's it.
So everything's moving right along the school year.
Yeah.
And is there any, I know we're looking at the parent portal a little further on. That's still on track.
Yep, it's on track. We're planning to open it in March. Teachers are feeling pretty confident about it. I think Mark is going to set up some training, and actually teachers are feeling like, well, that'll be a breeze. So it will be 5th through 8th grade to start with. It won't be K-8. It'll be 5-8. We'll get K-4 online with all of this for next year.
Okay. Any other questions? Any comments on that?
Is the portfolio that's going to be required for students going to be part of Power School? Isn't there an electronic portfolio, the 306?
There's an electronic portfolio, but I don't believe it will be part of that.
I don't think it can be part of Power School. It's not part of that software. I don't know if you could make a link.
It doesn't necessarily make sense that we would store that kind of stuff on someplace that the student didn't have access to. In other words,
Oh, I see. I just was wondering if parents were going to be able to access their students' electronic portfolios through Power School.
Well, I don't know if there's a way we could link to it.
so he's thinking
I'm
that
not
I'm
sure.
sure there's a way.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Well, because there's going to be so much neat stuff on it, especially if we started in kindergarten with kids, and they'll be able to see this history, this video history. I think that would be so cool.
I think we might look at a link link somehow so the parents can access it. That would be an excellent idea.
I know you sent out surveys.
Yeah, those went with the report cards, but they're returned to the SAU,
Oh, okay.
so.
They just went out.
They went out on Friday.
So that evaluation process would be the next couple of months, tabulating and.
Yes, usually it comes back pretty fast. We've done them in all the other school districts, and they come in within a month. So we will have results for you at the January meeting. What we're doing is we're just tabulating the yeses and nos. Then we give them to Pam to go over each of the surveys with the staff, and then you actually will see the surveys. Yes, so that you can actually look through each one. I'm sure Henniker's will be like the rest of the district, very positive. We've had very positive feedback from parents.
Are you going to make copies of all of them for us?
No, but I'm actually going to just put them in a folder, and you can just pass them around and look at them at your leisure. So we're just getting started, though. I would imagine they'll start coming back.
And is that going to be an annual?
Annual, would we do a parent satisfaction survey
Yeah,
annually?
I don't know why not. You could do it first trimester every year.
Sure.
That's what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
I think we've done it before,
We have.
just not maybe annually.
Yep.
It could
We've
be.
done it at the end of the year
Yeah,
sometimes,
usually
but
end of the year.
that first trimester.
I like this instrument. I'll be interested to see what you think of the questions and whether you liked it. Or we really ought to sort of settle on something if we're going to do it annually where we can sort of see trending and results. So,
Right.
so that'll be a discussion that we'll have to.
And are these the same questions that went out?
To all the SAUs, yes, we all use the same survey this time. So,
Great, anything else on the principal's report?
That's it.
Thank you, Pam.
You do not have a written report for me. I have done nothing but budget and negotiations for the last month. I will pick that up again in January. I'm looking to let you know about progress on goals, particularly SAU goals and technology and curriculum and the like. So I have manifest for you to sign, and if you have any questions, you can.
Any questions for Christine? All right, we'll move on to retirement under personnel. So Darby McGraw has requested an early retirement. Her intent to retire from full-time teaching in June 2008.
So this, do I make a motion to accept this?
You do.
I make a motion to accept this early
Okay,
retirement.
is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on that?
Is this our second one?
It is your second one.
The
Sorry.
first one was
Abby.
Abby and and then our two that are coming up this year are Fran and Gail.
Any discussion on this request? No? Or the intention to retire? Maybe we can accept two with the early retirement program. And, I don't have any, yeah, that's kind of the way I look at it. All right, well, if there's no other discussion on it, then all in favor of accepting Darby McGraw's intent to retire with early retirement? What do we call that? Is it called early? Yeah, early retirement, 2008. Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, it's unanimous. Board votes in favor of that. Well, then we'll move on to old business. And there's nothing right now under old business. I think we were trying to save as much time as we can for the new business, which is the budget discussions and understanding that. So we'll move on to the new business, which is presentation of the 2007-2008 budget. I know each of the board members has a copy of the budget. I believe we have copies available in the school. Is that correct?
I've got another one back here, if you'd like your own book to look at. I just showed him. Oh,
And
and I told him
also-
he had to report to you.
We also have,
I have this one.
You
we
have your
also
own.
have budget available at the library, I
Correct.
believe, and at the SAU, right?
And that John Stark.
And at John Stark. Okay. So we want to make sure it's available for those that are interested in seeing it. Because a lot of numbers, and sometimes it's hard to understand just listening to people talk. But anyway, Jim, I guess you want to walk us through it? It's a little bit different format this year, I think.
Yes, and we're always trying to give you more information and improve the way we give it to you. We're almost there.
Is this part of that software?
It is.
Upgrade of the SAU?
Using what's called the notes section of the budget sense software that allows the principal and people that are building the budget to enter notes into the detailed description lines of the budget. And so we're trying to use that for board information as well as detailed information that we can trace. So what was I thinking when I built that budget? Christine and Doug certainly have probably introductory remarks because they essentially built the book for you, and I can talk a little bit about some of the revenue numbers and some of the other building pieces. But I don't know if you had anything first that you wanted to start with, or if you want me to just start with revenues, or how you want to.
I think we should just start with revenues. One of the, my role in this will be to walk you through some staffing changes that we would like the board to consider, but we will be doing that in a non-public session at the end of the meeting until the board makes decisions about whether or not they are accepting our recommendations or making some of their own. Jim's going to start with revenues, and Doug's going to present the rest of the budget, and I'll pick up at in the non-public. So you do revenues, Jim?
Well, the budget, as you can see in the book that you're somewhat familiar with, and many of you have been doing several budget seasons, so we're getting, as you said, this looks a little different from the past. And the good news is that you recognize what the past looked like, so you're all pretty seasoned budget builders as we start along. The budget, as you know, in Henniker, as with most school districts, is in very large part about salaries and benefits of staff. It's a people business, and 55% of our budget is salaries across the board for teachers and aides and custodians and cooks and principals and so forth, and another 17-18% is taxes and benefits, and so you're up close to 60-70% of the budget by the time you get done talking about salary and benefits, and you'll certainly hear a lot about that as the budget unfolds for Henniker. The tabs, as you go through, are essentially split into first tab that you come to is a budget summary, and we've tried to put together a one-page sheet that looks at the general fund, and again, this is what we're talking about is the general fund of the district here, and we'll talk as we get down through the appropriations about, in broad terms, the transfer to federal funds and the large food service fund. But the large discussion is essentially in the general fund appropriation for the district. As you look at the top of that one-page summary sheet, you see revenues from essentially three different sources, state, local, and federal sources. And we'll talk a little bit about each one of those. And then at the bottom half of that page, you'll see the expenditures broken down as the state accounting code requires by function, essentially. And they break it into instructional programs, both regular instruction and special education instruction, and then other instructional programs and co-curricular and athletics that you see in school. Support services to those instructions, the areas of guidance and health and psychological and speech and nursing and so forth. And then general administration, the overall board administration, the school administrative services, and that's essentially what's known as the office of principal. Business services, which are plant and property and people transportation, and then the current year's principal and interest on debt. As we start with the revenues, as you're likely familiar, at the top of that one-page sheet, and then behind it you'll see some detailed descriptions that are detailed on some revenue history with a 4-column spreadsheet behind the one-page sheet that talks about the actual revenue we received in 05-06, what we have set the tax rate for this current year. We talked about the tax rate, and that was built on some projections and some known revenues. What we had when we first built the budget last March in terms of proposed revenues, and you have the opportunity in September to revise your revenues just before the tax rate setting. And that happens because in many cases you're building your budget in March, particularly in the areas of catastrophic aid that you don't know the final numbers, and you do know them by the time you set your tax rate because they're based on expenses from the prior year. So there quite often can be a change from the March revenue estimates to the September revised revenues that the tax rates are set on. And usually we try to historically the budget fairly conservatively on the revenue side in March, so that we don't, over inflate revenues, anticipate a much lower tax rate impact, and then shock the taxpayer when the rate is set in the fall. So you hope that it would go the other way, if anything, a little bit, but not so much that you can't sell your budget. So that's the fine line the board has to walk between building a budget on the revenue side. So going from the top of the one-page sheet with revenues, we talked about state sources of revenue. And as you can see, when we built the budget at this point in time, and the adequate education grant, the Henniker portion for the elementary school, and the retained state education tax in Henniker is being built at the same revenue numbers as what we are receiving in 06-07. As you know, the law was challenged to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has indicated that the state legislature has until June, I believe, of 2007 to come up with a new definition of adequacy and to establish a law that will fund that. What that means for what revenues will be coming into school districts is unknown. There's obviously a current law that's in place that the Supreme Court has found illegal, and yet so we don't know yet what revenue we will get from the state. So we hope, and we're building our budget assuming, at least this version of the budget, assuming that it will be what we got last year, or at least what we got last year. That is only an assumption, and probably not a very solid one at this point in time. Likewise, the retained state education tax. Everybody anticipates that the rate will drop. We know as the town value goes up, you can still have to collect the same amount of money at the state, but it's all kept here locally. But the bill from the state education tax may be higher as the value of the town goes up, even if the rate drops a little bit. Those are two big unknowns, and they represent, the largest amount of revenue coming into the district other than local taxation. So that's a big wild card as we talk about building the budget. And all we can hope for and assume is that we will collect a grant from the state, adequate education funding of somewhere near the $1,611,000, so that our tax rate won't be affected. We would like to have it more, obviously, because that would then lower the local taxes to be raised. So, the school building aid we anticipate to receive at the same level as we received in 06-07 at $62,078. We're still in the process of paying off the bond, 20-year bond that was funded that rebuilt the school here in 1995. We're turning the corner, and we're in the second decade of that payment. However, the principal payment and the state reimbursement is built on the yearly principal payment on that bond. We do anticipate, as we talked about before, receiving catastrophic aid, and as you can tell, I've increased our estimates in revenue to $126,000 from $68,000 as we set the tax rate in 06-07. And that's because we anticipate we have significant new special education costs in 06-07, and you'll see them in the budget building on the expense side for 07-08. And I do anticipate that some of those children are significantly impaired and will be eligible for catastrophic aid, and I'm anticipating a significant revenue growth in catastrophic aid. We'll know that's one of the numbers we'll know even better next fall when we set the tax rate. So I estimated to begin with $126,000. I think that's a conservative number, but not so conservative that we're not anticipating. It's not going to be 226.
And Tim, is it a percentage of our special ed expense?
It's based, you only qualify for catastrophic special education aid if you reach, it actually starts at expenses for special education students 3.5, correct me if I'm wrong, 3.5 times the state average tuition. That's the floor. Then you receive 80% of the bills that you pay on a special education student from that point to $50,000 in costs. You receive 100% from $50,000 to 100,000. I think you're right, Christine. And then
I don't know
I'm
what
not sure.
What's the formula?
Yeah, but the point is it's a tiered system.
And is that aid that you get in the year that you are?
No, you get it the year after. So you will submit all of our catastrophic aid costs in 06, 07. Has to be done, Carol tested does this at our office, by July. So July of 07, we'll submit all the costs for the 06, 07 year. And then the state will then add those to all of the other school districts in the state of New Hampshire, compare it to what the state appropriation for catastrophic aid is. Hopefully there's enough funding statewide to pay all that obligation, all that entitlement obligation. If it isn't, they percentage, they ratchet it down. So if they have $200 of the bills and only $100,000 worth of first state appropriation, everybody gets 50%. So, and we have had times when we've set the tax rate on 50-somewhat% of the entitlement for catastrophic aid. Unlike school building aid when they run short, the state legislature has been always very good about going back and doing a supplemental appropriation for state building aid. They haven't felt that obligation in the catastrophic aid area every year. It depends on how rich they feel at the state side.
But we would find out in September of the year.
Yeah. Well, you'll know by the time you set that. But I do anticipate we'll get significantly more, and that's one area where we pushed revenues up in our budget building.
The catastrophic aid that you have budgeted for 2007, 2008, is that the catastrophic aid you anticipate coming in based on this year?
This year's students.
Okay. However, on the other side, on the expenditures, we're putting it in for what we anticipate,
Spending in 07, 08.
and we anticipate, okay, so this is tricky.
You could always be behind the
As
curve.
that population changes, it
Right.
has a big impact.
Right, and it seems like we're, I won't get into that discussion.
You could have a fortunate year when you've got catastrophic aid revenue coming in, and all your students go away onto the high school or whatever.
But that's not the case.
That's not the case this year.
But it could happen.
We do have a number of students that are going on to the high school, but we've got some additional ones and additional expensive children impacting this budget. We'll be talking about that in a bit. Anyway, catastrophic aid that's the process for the revenue called catastrophic aid. We do also receive a small amount of money from the state of New Hampshire, a state appropriation for the hot lunch program, and it's been pretty levelly funded at around $1,350 for the last 2 years. It's a very small entitlement. On the local sources, obviously the largest local source is the local tax assessment, and as you can see with the first round of budgeting that we've done here, that while the budget overall in the general fund is only up to 0.68%, less than 1%, but it impacts the tax rate higher than that. It actually impacts the tax rate with essentially a 48-cent tax rate increase. And that's because we have one big revenue that we're not budgeting for as we go. We also have to wait, and we'll come to it in a minute. We anticipate that we will collect local tuition revenues, and our local tuition revenues are essentially the kids that are not handicapped that do come into the preschool program, and we charge them tuition because we're not obligated to provide education to a non-handicapped child at the age 3 and 4 age level. While there is a program requirement to appear and mix in that group. We receive transportation revenue from the John Stark School District. That's part of the Articles of Agreement with John Stark. And when John Stark was created out of the Henniker School District, and essentially that represents the cost of the mileage for those buses that transport from the preceding district, from the Henniker Elementary School to the John Stark School, and then back in the afternoon, based on our transportation contract with Goffstown Truck. We anticipate some growth, as you can see there, in our earnings on investments from $12,000 this current year to $25,009, and that's based on what we've been receiving in the past year and the fact that short-term interest rates are climbing and have held high. We also have the advantage that, unlike the old days before the state adequate ed money, where most of the money was coming from the local tax base, and we would only take money from the town treasuries as we needed to meet current payroll and current accounts payable. Now we get a larger portion, as you can see, from the adequate ed grants, and they come in particular times, September, November, December, in quarterly chunks. So larger pieces of money are sitting in the school district treasury, and we set up accounts with our banks to sweep them out every night and put them in money market rollovers and that sort of thing. Jan Hale is your elected treasurer and is very good, I must say, is doing that. She also is our treasurer at John Stark. She's our ace treasurer, and enjoy working with her. Contributions and donations at $9,500. This is essentially represents the Cogswell Trust Fund money. When Leander Cogswell built the original building here in 1930, he gave it to the town of Henniker. He also established town of Henniker trust funds for the operation of the school. There's a separate trust fund that is set up for improvements to the Cogswell building that's separate from this $9,500. But this $9,500 is the estimate of the income from that fund that was established just for the ongoing operations of the school. And that's what this line item represents. And we also receive, as you know, food service, local sales, student sales and purchases, adult purchases of lunch, milk purchases, and so forth. And the $110,000 is our revenue estimate for that. You notice that's down from $115,000 as we built the budget this prior year. And one of our issues with declining enrollment was that there are few students eating lunches. We're hoping to counteract that with the program, hot lunch program, and hopefully increase participation. But for the first time, we built this budget with a small tax appropriation in the hot lunch program. And in the detail of the revenue pages, 2 or 3 pages behind you, you'll notice that my detail under the food service lunch sales that we anticipate local fees of we have a budget, of $136,150 for the lunch on the expense side. We anticipate we'll sell local lunches of $110,000. We'll receive federal and state assistance of $22,350, and that there'll be a district assessment, or essentially a tax assessment, of $3,800 to stabilize the hot lunch program. That lunch program has lost money in the last couple of years. We hope it turns around. I think that we need to be practical for this coming year and be able to see if we can help it. That's a very small appropriation for it. It's been years since Henniker's had to have a tax appropriation for hot lunch, but that's not unusual in a lot of schools, particularly as we change the menu, that do a better food selection. There's the food costs, as you know, have gone up, and shipping costs have gone up. It's not a linear issue in terms of reducing staff. You have to have a person on the line when you serve 100 lunches or 125 lunches. There's only so much you can cut down the staff and that sort of issue. So we're kind of into that plateau period. Pam and I and Marty Davis have already met to look at lunch issues and help support Marty to get to as much as she can out of this budget. So, but it is an area we've talked about.
Well, one of the board goals this year was to support the lunch program and look at the quality of the program.
Yeah.
And we understood at that time there may be some additional expense for the types of food that we're buying.
I'm hoping. I was a little surprised when I looked at the numbers and built the budget here. I said, I thought it might be a little worse than $3,800.
That doesn't seem very much.
So if we can help stabilize it and work with that to try to get the profit margin back up by increased participation and a little tightening of our budget.
And that's starting to happen, right?
Starting to pick up, yeah.
Yeah, we're starting to see some trends, so we're hoping they hold. Anyway, there's a little hot lunch issue there for us to look at. There we go. Okay, we're at this point in time, until you bill the rest of your warrant, there's no transfer from the maintenance, from the expendable trust. We haven't appropriated money to say we're going to put a new roof on and take the money from the expendable trust. If you have a special warrant article, you'll see a revenue side, that money transferring over, and the expenditure side. So obviously, we're not at that point in building the budget. The large item that really you don't see in the 07-08 budget building that is in the 06-07 line on the summary page is the unreserved fund balance. And as we spoke before, one of the reasons our tax rate was able to go down a little bit this past year is that we turned back $236,811 from both excess revenues and some of that was catastrophic aid revenues, which is what encouraged me to bump those up, and from being under budget in the appropriation side. And we were very fortunate last year in the budget, and we were fortunate in revenues. Our interest income was up higher than we had set the tax rate the previous year. And so obviously we're not anticipating a like $236,000 on the revenue side as we build the 07-08 budget. So that's a big revenue that transfers into tax rate.
So under this draft, if it all goes as it is, then the taxpayers would see a 48-cent increase in the state, I mean
in the tax rate,
the local
right.
portion. Then in September, if we happen to get more revenue than we anticipated under the special ed, that would offset that.
Right. And if we turn back some fund balance, which I anticipate we will, not to the extent we did last year.
Well, that was a lot.
Yeah, that was an extraordinary year. Going down on the federal sources of revenues, you can see where we increased the estimate for Medicaid revenue from $27,007 currently to $66,000. And again, that directly is attributable to Medicaid eligible reimbursement for special education students. And I anticipate that going up based on our student population, our special ed population that are eligible for Medicaid in our current year, and I anticipate will be in the 07-08 year. Unlike catastrophic aid, you receive that as soon as you incur the expense and file the claim. It's a health insurance reimbursement program. What we anticipate from grants, and there's an expenditure side that's equal, is $77,722. It's a little bit down from the $92,150 that we built the budget on in 06-07, and I believe the reduction there is the REAP.
Right. Whether or not we look at that again, because we're at the end of 3 years and we have to reapply.
Yeah. And it's one of those non-tax rate issues. You have a revenue item you have to incur and have an equal expense transfer of federal funds for what you receive in federal funds. Child nutrition is the last item, and we anticipate just a slight reduction in that from $22,000 to $29,000.
Actually, one question on the grant. So if we didn't get the grant, then we wouldn't have the expense?
Correct. Right. You only can receive from federal grants what you've expended once you've been approved. So that's kind of a quick walk through the revenue items, and the hot button issues there obviously are what will the adequate education grant do? We may or may not know that by the time the March voting comes around. How safe are we feeling about the state reimbursements for catastrophic aid and other aids? And what will the growth rate be in the town as it impacts the tax rate? But essentially, if we're looking at things all told, without saying we're going to turn back fund balance, then everything that increases in the budget tends to flow to the local tax assessment. You can go back over them anytime. I don't really understand, or I'd like to talk about that some more.
When do they set exactly the growth rate in town to the tax rate? Like, you're always talking to the guy over at town hall, right? When you're talking about... yeah, thank you.
The net assessed valuation, we'll be doing that right along. For example, we've anticipated with this, for example, I've anticipated the continued 1% growth in net assessed valuation. Our current net assessed valuation increase is $393,461,000, and on the summary sheet here, you'll notice where the number that I'm driving the 07-08 tax rate from is $397,396. So I've assumed a continued 1% growth in our net assessed valuation. I need to confirm that as Steve Flynn and others develop the budget at the town level.
By March, we would
Yeah,
have.
both Russ Roy at the town and Pete, they'll come up with that as they build a town budget, and
When
then
do
we'll
they-
match theirs.
And when do they come up with that?
Oh, they'll be doing that shortly, because the town hearings are set for first part of January, so they're doing that exercise now, so could be by the time we get into our next meeting. I don't anticipate it'll be much different than that 397 million. My guess is it's underrated that number.
Could I ask a question about that? Jim, it's the increase in the net assessed value, is that based on property value or additional property being created in town?
Both. Either a reappraisal for some reason, or more likely now that they've done the complete townwide reappraisal spot, the new permits that they go up and assess.
So it's new construction.
Add to the tax
New,
base,
yeah.
yeah, new construction.
I just want to point out one thing. One of the warrant articles that the planning board's going to be doing is growth management. We've had it for 3 years, and it sunsets, and it phases. That's one of the biggest factors of it, phases development. And so I just want to point that out. It doesn't eliminate any growth. It only allows so much growth per year, and it's a factor based on our surrounding towns too, which I think is a good factor to have.
So you're talking to an audience who probably wants growth right now. Our enrollment's going down.
Well, it's actually glad Scott's here, because there's another issue, and it's really not on the agenda, but we might want to invite him back to help us with this. The town, several years back, correct me if I'm wrong about this, Scott, implemented in their ordinances a growth ordinance fee to develop, specifically for schools.
School impact fee.
Oh, right.
That's right, and that's a revenue that you don't have
And
reported
you
yet.
have to apply, and I've never worked with this before, but my very rough understanding of that is you need to apply for it as it impacts your growth.
No.
Is that right?
Basically, any new building lot created after a certain date, I don't want to give the date because I don't want to be wrong, is assessed a school impact fee. And the fee right now is about $5,400 for a single-family home. If it's a two-family home, it's something else. This is an account that Russ has set up, and anytime anybody goes for a building permit, they get assessed it, and they have to pay it. That's the tricky part. Usually it's when you get a C of O, and we don't have C of Os here. But it is a revenue source, and it's strictly for the school to cover capital expenses. So you need to be careful how it's defined. But I don't know if it's generated any income yet, but it may have.
Yeah.
We haven't
It
seen
did.
any yet.
Yeah, but we haven't.
And I don't know what the application, which I think you're, as Scott says.
It's
like
new lots
capital,
created
right?
after a certain date. If you have a lot that you've had for hundreds of years and build on it, you do not get assessed. But if you subdivide that lot, one of those new lots will be assessed. And when you go to build on it, you don't get assessed, you don't have to pay until you build on it. But it gets assessed. Unfortunately, that rate is static, which is probably a mistake. It doesn't go up with time. You know, if we don't do something, it'll be the same 5,400 in 10 years.
No, we don't have a line item for.
Yeah, there isn't anything because of the operational budget, because it's capital.
It's capital, it's not
capital
operation.
improvement, it's capital
Yeah.
growth. You know, and the intent is that as people develop in town, it impacts the need to grow your school, build your school
Haven't
bigger.
received any?
But we haven't.
You
we
can
haven't
though,
had an issue, and-
because it also can be used to pay off expenses incurred in anticipation of future growth, which is your bond payment, so
We would
it can be
expect
used.
in the future, because this is new, we would anticipate in the future we may receive some revenue from that.
Yeah, and as Scott says, if you built your school anticipating growth, and you have a debt service, should we apply some of that tax impact fee?
We
And how do you
did.
do that? I don't know the
Oh,
answer.
we did?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We did do that.
No, we have not.
Oh, I thought when we did the town, but 10 years, or 6 years ago when we.
Oh, we did sell a bond, but we have not applied for the impact aid, I guess is what I want to say.
Which could be reducing what
Yeah.
we paid for
We
taxation.
could put a, I mean, if we go through the process, we might add a line item.
See, right now we pay 100, whatever the, say 100,000 for the bond, I can't remember what it is.
That'd be interesting.
Principal interest, 293,000. If we got 10,000, we do a separate line and pay off that portion of it. Perhaps, I mean, these are the details we can figure out, but we don't have any of that revenue now we can count on in this budget. But that is something that would be positive for taxpayers. start realizing that.
Which you will. It will come in. We've assessed quite a number of them so far. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, I've heard
Probably-
you from Nick and Scott.
And there's other capital things like roof repairs, there's a lot of big, a lot of things that, as long as it meets that criteria. we spend that.
I'm going to make a note to talk with people in the town about how to
Yeah, thanks, Scott.
apply that,
Yeah.
what the issues are.
What's our account saying with the town?
Russ.
Russ.
Yeah.
Yeah, talk to Russ about it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I knew it.
You saved me from asking that question right there, thank you.
Okay.
All right,
No, this.
what I'd like to do is thank Jim for all his effort that he's put into this
That's
all
fascinating
happened
to me.
in front of us.
Yeah.
Pam and her staff did a great job feeding us that information that you have in front of you tonight. The next part of the book, if you go to the next tab, is school enrollment, and this is being done, is driven through Doug Brown's report. And as you can see, you have what the history's been and what Doug is projecting over the next 4 years. In addition to that, these are his projections if we look at the 5-year average and the 3-year average also. Again, that gives you an opportunity to see that they're pretty close to what the projection is for the 1 year that you have in front of you at the present time. And just remember that the figures that he uses does not include our preschool parents. So, again, you can see that we're moving. Can you get those over to the audience? Again, presently we're at 444. He's projecting in 2007 or 415. It continues to drop down to 385 by his projections in 2010. So again, some of the decisions that are being made in the driving of the budget has a little bit to do with what we're seeing as potential enrollment. And again, as we look at that, and we look at how does that fit in with our class sizes and anticipated enrollments that way, Ken was good enough to be able to.
These are preliminary and we're not going to,
So again,
because they
that's
would
just,
be based on decisions the board's going to make
Okay.
later in the
You
evening.
have to share these with you just
we're holding on. But again, that gives you kind of an understanding of what we're driving for the enrollment piece too. Going to the next part of the budget, unless anybody has any questions on enrollment at this time. And again, some of those discussions will happen as we move through the evening and we talk about staff later on tonight. So the next thing, as we go to the next part, and that's our line item budget. And basically, as you look at the line item budget, what you're going to be able to see is that you see what the budget was in 05, what we expended in 05-06, the present budget, which is 06-07, and what we're proposing in 07-08. So again, that's by the line, and you'll be able to go through that in a minute. As we look at this, and we look at what's driving this budget this year, as we come to look at the decisions that were being made, there are two things that are really driving where we got to the bottom line here. And the first one is the special ed increase, which is up 14% over last year in the special ed department. And again, that's looking at the services needed by that population that is either in the school or will be coming into the school. In addition, the same thing happens with special ed transportation, which is increased by 47% over last year's budget. Again, the same reason, because of either a change in population or additional services that are needed by the population that this population needs. On the other side of this, balancing that or bringing it, decreasing the budget from last year is regular ed in a decrease of about 8% or $199,469. And in the budget that you're seeing, this decrease is a result of the reduction in force in response to the declining population that I just presented to you in the budget trend.
Just have a quick question on the change in census for the special ed population. is that significant, or is it just the amount of services being required?
It's a little of both. It's additional students, but also some of the students that are here are needing additional services, and the ones that are coming in are possibly needing higher services than the ones who are leaving and going to the high school. So again, we have that situation of the trade-off of what's leaving and what's coming in, and the cost of doing business for these particular students.
And not that we have any control over this, but I'm curious, percentage of our budget for special education compared to maybe other schools? I mean, maybe we only have that information for our SAU, I don't know, but it seems to me that we would be higher than the average. Are we? Which affects the taxpayer, the tax rate, obviously.
Well, particularly in this proposed budget, because as we've made changes in regular ed, in order to support increased costs in special ed, you really tilt the percentage wheel around.
It might be of interest to the community at some point in time, when they compare tax rates to other communities for the local school, that is a big driver of cost. It might be interesting to read any information about that if that came up in discussion. Just to put it in perspective.
I can look into that. As we continue, and as Jim addressed earlier in his presentation, we're just under 0.7%, which is 40,082. The actual number is 0.68. And again, as you go through and you look at the information, additional information there, one of the things is that our the professional staff is in negotiations right now, so they are budgeted at the present cost of the contract that is present. So later on, if there is a warrant article on this, the negotiations are complete at that point in time, that would be something else that would be presented to the public. But right now, the numbers that are in this budget are driven off of the contract that is presently in place. Another part of the budget that is impacted is that you have a increase in health costs, which is 10.3. That's the maximum amount of increase that will happen. Those are the numbers that have been shared with us. And there's also a 10% increase in dental insurance costs over the past budget that was presented. Something else that is coming forward, and again, is the employees' contribution to retirement, which is going to impact this budget all the way through as you look at personnel. And what you see there is, with teachers, is the increase is going from 3% that we've been paying for them up to 5.8%. And for support staff, it moves from 6.8% to 8.7%. And that is noted throughout the budget every time that particular line item shows up for personnel. And our non-teaching professional staff is budgeted in here with a 4.4% raise, and our support staff is receiving a 6% increase, which is established by the second year of their contract. So again, those are the kind of things that you see overall in the budget. That's a quick summary of what you'll find as we go through this.
Just so it's clear for everybody, the retirement part is determined by the state retirement system.
Correct.
And we have no control over that.
That is
We
correct.
have to.
So by state statute.
Us and other schools. So
Correct.
that's
Everybody
significant
across
increase
the
in
state.
cost.
And that's an impact that you will see each time you look at personnel. And it's noted throughout the budget, and you'd be able to see exactly what it would cost for our teachers, what that impacted to teachers at the present rate, and with all of the other support staff.
Just sort of an aside, I mean, the community will also be supporting that increase to the towns, with police and fire as well, right? So it's not just teachers, but it's an additional.
So significantly higher for police and fire than it is.
Okay, as you go through your book, and as we look at the budget proposal by function, for each one of these line items that is in this budget line, again, we're going to skip staffing at this present time until later on in the evening, but if you were to look at, we're going to look at instruction. If you go to the yellow tab in your book, and we would look at the first line, which is teacher salary, you would see the notes that would back up how we come to that particular cost. So again, as you go through that, each time If you look at your function piece of the budget, in the line item piece, you can go back to each of the sections that are set up exactly how your function pages are set up, and that's going to drive each and every note behind each and every cost that is there.
Are they, that's a little different format this year than last year. Is it
Correct.
broken down into the same general ledger items or numbers?
Yes.
whatever you want to call
So
it?
if you went to,
That is the same?
yeah,
But we just don't have the comparison. I think before we had a comparison of one year to the next. That's what I
In
missed.
that detail, but yeah. What I find that is a good way to do it is when we get down to going line by line, I would take your line item budget.
right.
What I find is the standard is pull that right out and put that, as one sheet, and then go to your detailed backup description. So you've got the regular education teachers, the first line item, the account 100, 1100, 016, 110, regular ed teacher salaries, a proposal of $1,582,696. And then in your notes section, in the backup, under the yellow tab, let's see, that's the existing staff, as built with 0607, at their 0607 rates. It's a decrease in the number of them due to anticipated retirements and potential reductions in force. It's anticipated retirements that are budgeted. It's contractual track changes of 12,130. And that's how the one.
So we can see the increase or decrease in the
Yeah,
detail.
Right.
so as you go down through each line item, you kind of say, what were they thinking when they budgeted that? That's the goal there.
Right.
But the advantage of having your sort of spreadsheet out is you can go, well, what did we spend in 05 and 06? What's the 06, 07 budget? And so you have both resources in front of you.
Right, so if you had that out and we were looking at teaching salaries, you would actually see 11.56% reduction. So then that would be the way to do that. And this has a lot to do with, and has been driven by our new software, and our budget software, because this is how it produces. And Pam was able to go in and put many notes to back up some of the information and requests that were there. And then we were able to format it and provide you with the document that gives you some backup. So you could go to each one of those particular
So
areas.
every piece of software does something good and something else that drives you nuts. And in this one, when it does this, you'll notice how this is a budget sense piece of software that got exported out. And you have the margins. And they said, why didn't they write this report so it writes the whole 8.5 by 11 with perhaps a 1-inch margin, like a standard Word document would be. And then you probably would have enough spread to get the 0506 or the 0607 current budget at least, and it would also spread the sort of description out into a longer column and shrink this whole budget with notes section down from a 60-page document to a 30-page document, which you could then run back to back and have a nice 15-page handout built by the individual users. It would be just so.
I didn't ask you.
I put my 2 cents in, but I haven't made that change. I hope they don't charge me for that upgrade that software. I don't think that someday along the way they've been good about doing upgrades, but we haven't gotten to that one yet.
One of the things we were aiming for was so that any question you get from the floor, you want to be able to turn to the notes section, because Pam's and Doug's work here, and know what's on that line in detail. So I like it for that reason. You don't have to have all that page shuffling.
It's just a matter of,
I know.
Getting used to how you work it, right? Exactly. Nice thing about it is I think it'll give you points where you can write notes yourself as you come up with questions or points that you might need at a hearing or on the phone with somebody that you're unsure about.
Right. So if you went through that and we were talking about the retirement piece, well, all of the other parts of this is pretty much, there's been reductions. You get to that teacher retirement cost, which is going to be that increase from 3.8 to 5.8. It goes up 38% in this particular piece. That jumps right out at you. Again, I think there'll be more work when we go to the budget session on that Saturday. There'll be more time for us to really go down deeper into it. We'll try to do the rep and do the depth on the 16th. Again, if there's particular questions as you go through this, then I would be more than willing to address them. but I just wanted to get you the feel for how this book works and how you can go back and really pick it apart if you need to. So, again, the first part was that the teacher's part of it, and then when you go to general, there was a piece on substitution, but then you go to the general, and then you will see each of the areas in the budget, each of the content areas, and there would be supplies, books, and other materials that would be needed by each subject area. So if you were on pages, starts on page 2, but page 3 would have like art, world language, life skills. So it's all done by your programs, which again keeps going right down with your budget sheet or your function proposal, which in the budget proposal in your book is back to back. So make sure you turn it over at times. Make sure you stay with that. So that's kind of how that moves
General
on.
supplies must have gone up because we had a parent comment that they had to buy their first grader some markers.
Based on what we actually spent.
You know, again, it goes down, and when you were reading those supplies, I mean, again, Pam's teachers and herself did a great job of being able to pinpoint exactly what we're spending on each of those areas. And why, you know, if we're going to buy a particular book, the rationale behind what that was going to be, whether it was going to fill some books that are outdated, or whether or not it's to finish a set of books that we needed more for the students in each of the classes. So that takes you through that. So that takes you all the way through the 1100s, and then it's all totaled at the very end. So that kind of runs you through that. And then within your yellow tab, which end up happening, is then you would go to at your first yellow piece of paper, you would have the same thing for special ed. So again, you would go through, and it would start with personnel and all of the benefits and taxes that go along with that.
My question about special ed is, does this include the ones that are on grants too? So when I'm looking at the total expenditure, are some of these are
This is the actual, your budgeted piece. The IDA grant is not
okay,
here.
so this is
just
taxpayer dollars.
correct.
Okay.
This is what was impacting the bottom line.
Right, there are a couple of aids, for example, that have been funded under the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act grant, and which is an SAU-wide grant, and they're not, those personnel costs are not in this general fund.
So again, as you're going through instruction, so you're going to see a section on special ed, and it's broken down the same way as we just did in the previous section. And then as you continue through instruction, there's a piece on bilingual instruction, enrichment, the enrichment program, what that particular program is covering. And again, that's still under the instructional piece of the budget. So if you were back to Jim's piece in the front, all of that would match up to those particular lines. And then other instruction, which would be our co-curricular programs. So each of those are broken down and also broken out on your function sheet. So there's a good place of being able to follow each one of those parts of the budget and know exactly where you are, what we spent in the past. So hopefully it's user-friendly in that sense as you start to get comfortable with the numbers. So as we leave instruction and we go to support services, again, broken down in a similar fashion. As we go to the guidance department, you will see guidance staff, how many people we have in the guidance department, what all their health benefits were, what their impact would be as increasing the retirement piece, and all of the other services that go along with that, the supplies and all of that, the total amount, the guidance would cost for your particular school. So it's there on one clean sheet that you would be able to go through and see exactly what that impact is. And then you did the nurses service, psychology. Then we get, as we go through and we look at psychology, we look at occupational therapy, speech service, and Pam, correct me if I'm wrong, all of those additional services are, again, increased because of some of the services needed by the special ed population that's coming in. So any increases that you particularly see in them, that may be a major increase. And again, I try to capture those anytime that was happening with the notes. So if there was a case that there was a particular increase over what was last year, that increase was caused either by additional students coming in that needed that service, or the students who were already here who were determined that they needed additional service. So you'd be able to see that as you move through it. Again, other parts of this is curriculum development, the amount of money that we're spending there, professional development, the amount of money that staff would get to attend workshops. And again, each time you go to one of these pages, what I try to do is keep it so that it's on a single page. You could clearly look at that was what it was and how much it was going to cost. So hopefully you find that to be user-friendly also. And you can do the same thing with the library and continue right through. So again, that's support. Does anybody have any questions on that? How you're reading this, how you can interpret what is there. And again, like I said, they'll get that opportunity to get more specific and ask particular questions.
I do agree, though, the format of the notes is very helpful. And for us,
I think it gives you talking points as opposed to jump off with and then be able to ask questions if you need more clarification. Okay, as we go, and again, the next tab is general administration. And here's where the school board part of the budget is.
These are the school board raises
other raises well, too.
So all of the things that fall under. So all of the things that fall under general administration, which would be the school board, the treasurer, holding your district meeting. And again, I don't need to read all of these, it just kind of follows through. And you would find a function code over here that would allow you to see what you had spent last year compared to the increase or decrease accordingly this year. And then school administration, this is where the principal's office is. This is the types of things that would be under Pam's jurisdiction here. Salaries of the personnel that's there, including the secretaries. Again, in each one of these, you're going to find one of the biggest increases across the board is that retirement piece, so just remember that as you're going through.
Do we have a sense overall for the whole school, what we're looking at, Jim? Those percentage increases?
Under retirement?
Is it like 70,000, 40,000, or 50,000? It's a large amount. Percentage of payroll. I mean, it'll be broken out throughout the whole budget.
Right.
Total, it's going to be a large amount to absorb.
For non-certified staff, it's a $6,866 increase over the current year. For the certified staff, it is an increase of $44,187. Their old budget's up $40,000. Teaching and certified staff retirement is up 44.
It's over 50.
We've obviously trimmed somewhere else.
2,000.
Yeah.
And then you have the non-personnel, like the guidance and the principal and stuff too.
Yeah, they are in the certified staff.
Other than the certified staff.
Yeah.
So it's $50,000.
So again, you can specifically see what's going on in the principal's part of the budget and the things that are there, which is considered all of the supplies that are needed to run that office, and also what she needs to for graduation and so on and so forth.
I think it's probably important to note the base number, when you're talking about percentage increases in your budget, the 0607 baseline number is $5,864,000. So for every percentage point increase in your budget, 7 or 8, every $58,000 is a point on your budget. So when we're talking about retirements, that is almost a point on the budget all by itself.
So again, more detail on the principles if you need to get something, we can have that discussion. And then we're going to business services, and again, this is the operation and maintenance of the plant and school facilities. So all of your maintenance costs on running of the facility is in this particular area, including personnel, which is your custodial staff, and the supervision of that is also the person who supervises over them is in this particular part of the budget. Again, then it's broken out into operating building services, which is your disposal services, buildings and grounds contract, all your electric, heating, plumbing, and again, all of those kinds of things. To run your building, you would find in this particular part of the book, to back up the overall line that you had before. And, you know, you go directly to utilities and what it would cost for oil and so on and so forth, and you see exactly how much that is and what we anticipate or are going to be paying for.
So the sewer charge, the water and sewer charge is under this line item.
Right, that would be on page 36.
And it's about 38,000 or something. It's a big
27.
About 27,000.
On page
yeah.
36
I
was.
mean, the first year was actually budgeted for this.
Yeah, 27,700.
Right, that's a new.
So
another
that's
addition.
pretty, almost,
Yeah.
that's over half a point, percent.
Yeah, that teacher retirement is a big.
Yeah. We always have had to pay the water charges to Coswell Springs Water Works, and that's a little over 2,000 a year. And anticipating the sewage bill will be 27,000. Subject for discussion.
I mean, just to put in perspective, if we gave no increases in pay and kept, you know, everything the same, we're still going to have an increase because of just those two items, retirement and.
Yeah, this budget is pushed by those items and the significant special ed population.
So actually, if we kept everything the same, we would see an automatic increase of.
Well, we'd have a huge increase if we didn't have any reductions.
Right. It would be.
Huge.
Should be 5-6% over the year.
Well, I think it's always good to look at, is like, you know, that we have an automatic 6% increase if it just stays the same.
Well, I guess I'm trying to acknowledge all the work and effort that went into giving us what we have right now,
Right.
because we were looking at a very difficult increase
Yeah.
without coming up with some appropriate reductions that you recommended to us. That we have to talk about.
Yeah,
Right.
the first boss of putting this budget together, we all went, uh-oh. We've got a long way to go. We've got some work. We've got to really think here. Because you're right. When you first just put down the cost, you go, that's up. That's up. And that's so like at home, you go, uh-oh.
Time to make the donuts.
Yeah.
But the principals, they go down a little bit.
Yeah.
That helps.
I have some extra sheets, I don't know, you did, you
I
should
got,
have them.
I got extras, I have
More?
extras as well.
Yeah.
Must have been photocopied.
Yeah, we photocopied
detail
for
breakdown
anything
for
on
the
contract and
plan.
maintenance. But I have to say, Bernie's just worth his weight in gold. I mean, to see the detailed budgeting that he's able to do, it's just phenomenal.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. I have extra.
I have extra.
Right.
We have a for saying.
What
I
ended
was
up
looking at it, I
happening-
go, wait a minute,
My
whoa.
brother got to have a
Yeah.
finger on the.
He had
Oh,
more
yeah,
this
I
year.
did
She didn't realize that it was
Oh, yeah, I was
four different,
I
it
had
was
five
one, it was
too.
one of the same.
Oh.
So
So
it-
you can get rid of 3 of them.
Right.
Oh, I sent her 5 copies, one for each book, and she
Right,
read them.
she ran them off.
Hey, if the woman does a lot.
She does a lot.
Thrown together in a very short period of time.
So again, if you were to go back to page 35 and you look at 31,187, that, and then you look at the buildings and grounds, contracted maintenance, he has broken it out to the penny on what he is spending.
Which is
in
helpful.
particular, which is that backup to more than what we originally listed in the front. Okay?
Thank you, Bernie. So this 15,000, in page 37 is the first time we're going to have that snow plowing too. Like last year.
No, last year, we budgeted on 607.
But what did we budget?
Like 10,000.
This is an actual contract this year, though. Last year we didn't have it.
Correct.
The town's sticking to
I
it.
thought we budgeted 15 last year,
Yes,
too.
the town is sticking it to us.
That's on tape, right?
You budgeted 15 last year.
We budgeted, okay. And that's what the contract was with,
The contract's less than that, but this line also includes training on install.
Right,
This
right.
includes repairs and keeping the snow blower going. There's a lot of sidewalk and snow blower actually beyond the snow blower contract.
Is this emergency generator that we pay for, is that something we do for the town?
Actually, it was paid for partially by the town when it first was installed.
Wasn't it for emergency?
It is, in part, allows us to be the public shelter.
Allows us to be the public.
Well, it's incorporated into the emergency management plan for the town.
Yes.
But
We do so
but the
much
school,
in town.
but ultimately the taxpayer pays.
Yeah.
Right.
Originally that came through partial from a FEMA grant that the town had done, and we paid part of it out of the school. Obviously, an improvement, the school that
Yes.
And there is obviously a small maintenance contract to keep the generator running, and it has to be filled with oil every once in a while. It comes on
Well, just
automatically.
take note that the town is attempting at the selectmen's level to keep their budget at like zero, you know, and it's easy to do it.
And for the record,
They hand.
two of the selectmen, I think, are past school board members.
I know, and it just shifted over. It's like, so I think we should find a way to
I
get
think they're the ones who got the town to the snowplow.
$37,000. Just want to play a little ping pong.
Well, is that it?
Well, right, and again, as we move through, I think one of the things is, and one of the things I noted as a budget driver earlier on was in transportation and your cost for special ed, which is up 47.13%. So, I mean, this is where you would find the detail behind how that number came out. And then debt service and fund transfers, yeah, same thing. And at some point in time, Jim will work his magic and come up with any other information.
I mean, the fund transfers are not a cost to the budget. They're just-
Correct.
Other than as we talked about
In and
before, the
out.
hot lunch project, to a certain extent, has a little bit anticipated that's lower revenues than it does expenses. The default of the net, the makeup is taxes, $3,800 with taxes, so, and the food service program is a tax. And there could be a discussion about the hot lunch budget, where it needs to go.
This was helpful walking us through.
So we have 10 days to study this before we.
Oh, that's right, we took the date for meeting.
Right, December 16th, Saturday.
However, if we have specific questions that are going to need more information, rather than wait till the 10th, should we contact somebody to say, give us
Jim or John?
That's a good idea, today as well. Have an opportunity to try to get some information, sure questions.
Something that took a,
Yeah, but still ask the questions that day for everybody else's
Yeah.
benefit, but at least they'll have the information for us over here. Because you always ask questions.
so then the next board meeting in January, an hour before, I think is what we picked last time.
We did?
So we'll hold a meeting, well, the meeting will still be held at 6:15, but then we'll have a forum available prior to the meeting, is that? That's prior to the formal
That's your
meeting.
call. Would you want to have it earlier? We could start the meeting with the phone.
We could do it either way. We need time to go in.
I think it's unfair to do the forum at 5:15, because it's difficult for a lot of people to get there, number one, and number two, they might anticipate that the forum is going to be at 6:15.
All right, so.
But I'm happy
start
to
at
meet.
6:15.
I'm happy to meet earlier, because you guys aren't being precluded to have it earlier. If you want to get through some of the business stuff, can we talk about
Oh, I
that?
see. Yes, you could start your meeting earlier and then stop, and start the forum at 6:15 if you wanted to.
We just think,
It's everybody's pleasure. That's fine.
yeah, might be a good idea, otherwise we'll be time.
So we'll start start 5:30?
That's the third, Wednesday the third.
Yes.
Up to you.
2007?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll start at 5:30 that day then. I think we need to decide that.
And curriculum won't
And curriculum won't be.
So the board meeting will be held at 5:30, and then we will build into the agenda time to start the meeting. Have the public
6:15.
forum, 6:15, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
And then finish whatever business after.
That will last.
So the presentation or and how we're going to present the information to that forum will be like similar to last time. We'll have a projector and a screen, or how do you want to do that?
Yes, and what we'll do is we'll have summary sheets so that people can follow along, that one-page summary sheets. And we'll have available at the meeting the line item budget, not the notes budget, but the line item.
So it'll be similar to what we would present to the public at the budget hearing.
At the public hearing,
It'd be a preliminary for that, and then based on the input from the public, if we made any changes. we
Yeah, but
project.
it's more casual, but it's sort of like an.
No, I know, but it would be, I'm just thinking the same type of format of slides and all that. Because I know last time we had some slides and
Yes.
visualize.
well, it does have to be more casual. I wonder, we haven't really thought out whether or not putting PowerPoint slides actually. But
Well, it's just
work on
something
that.
for us to think about. I just
Right.
think we need to
Some of
decide
those
how we
things
want to
might be
present
good,
it.
like the population, things to see, you know, that percentage you were talking about special ed, you know, little pie
The
chart,
highlights.
Right.
visuals that way.
I think we do that. Might not be as detailed as we would do for the public hearing.
No,
Sometimes it's handy, even if you have a one-page summary Excel sheet on the screen, you can talk and say, we're talking about this line here, then when people read it, they don't have to go, where did that one happen?
Well, thank you. Any further questions on the draft budget at this point from the board or administration? Okay. Then we'll move on to citizen speak. It's another part of the meeting where citizens and the public can speak. Would either one of you, maybe if you could just sign in, if you don't mind. It's okay, earlier. Okay. Sign in. Feel free to share with us whatever you like.
Okay, well, once I'm working my way backwards. On the presentation thing, and this may lead into my question, or may answer my question. If you do the PowerPoint presentation, the budget going up and the enrollment going down somehow make sure that has a good look to it, or don't put it up, would be my recommendation. But I have a question about the increase in the special ed. Is that an increase that other school districts are seeing, or is that localized to ours?
it depends.
That was one of my questions, and I think Jim was going to try to get a little more information.
Oh, yeah, I guess we're all familiar with it to a certain extent, because we've all seen it. I guess let me start just in terms of numbers, and I think Cam can follow up in terms of, in some cases, the sort of personal story of that. I think from terms of the numbers, we're seeing a significant increase in cost and difference. And a lot of that is Henniker has been very fortunate in the past. We've been able to, because of the kinds of students that are here and a very, very good student-to-teacher ratio in special ed and support services to be able to take care of special education students in district, which is, of course, the least restrictive, best circumstance usually for the family and the child and so forth. Now, that's okay, and we've handled some pretty significant students in that world. Pam can address that. We do seem to have a bump that's coming on. We have a number of students actually that are actually leaving Henniker and going to John Stark. They're age appropriate to go to the high school. And we at first thought, well, gee, that should help us both financially and in terms of just the intensity of taking care of special education students. And wouldn't you know, just about the time we thought we might be able to take a breath, we had both new students move in and students that were doing okay in the school have significant changes in their behaviors.
So so you would see, because my question isn't necessarily, well, I mean, part of it is per se to Henniker, but I meant, is this something like, is there an overall increase in need of special education in all school districts, or are we seeing a bump just in a?
No, I think it's a trend across the United States. It's definitely a trend. I go to the state business officials meetings, have to be on their executive committee, and every business administrator says they can't keep a handle on special ed costs.
So if I was out.
And it's volatile.
Okay,
You have to sort of budget for the worst, and just about the time you do that, the student moves, the placement changes, and you don't have expense. And just about the time you don't budget for it, the worst thing happens.
So if I was out speaking to my neighbors and they were saying, oh my God, I can't believe how much special ed is going up, I would be able to reply, it's going up no matter what school district you are in.
I think that's
I
fairly
think that is a
accurate.
general good statement. Yeah.
We have starter students that go to the Keene School District, and in recent history, the past 5 years, that cost has gone up significantly each and every year that we pay for special education.
Okay, and then the increase in the retirement fund, is that a mandate that's in all school districts?
Yes.
Okay, so that's not, so every school district is seeing that same increase?
Every town, every school district.
And now, is that through contract or through state legislation, or how
In
is
the
that?
case for what they call statutory or state certified staff, teachers, principals, guidance, that's set by state statute.
Okay.
All employees who average 30 hours a week or more a school year who are certified must belong to the state retirement system.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good luck with your presentation. Remember, don't do the declining student increased cost. Not a good visual there.
You're on podcast, so it doesn't matter.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, I had another question, just to dovetail with that topic, about the student population. I didn't catch how the numbers were generated. I wondered if they were based on town data as far as building permits.
Good question. No, they're not. Doug Brown was the deputy commissioner, was the superintendent here in this SAU back in the 50s, early 60s. Does our consulting on our population trends. He uses the cohort survival index that essentially is built off of Bureau Vital Statistics live versus number of students entering first grade the 6 years later, and then it does the survival index from one year to the next to track and trend inward migration. As with his studies, he does a 5-year average, a 3-year weighted average, and a 1-year past year history. But as Doug will often say, if you have a significant change in the socioeconomic issues in your town, such as a major subdivision that's now just become occupied, his trend analysis won't pick that up for some years.
Can I just follow up on that? I wonder why you don't do that, though. I don't think it would be difficult to get those numbers to compare. It's something we do automatically as part of our yearly report. We track building permits. And I think that would give a more accurate reflection of where you're headed. Because this is pretty dramatic on how fast it's dropping. Just from 06 to 08, you've got 47. You've got 2 classes, at least.
Yeah, but building permits don't give us population.
They're a very good indicator, though, because of new population, which is where you're going to get the kids from.
It's a valid question, Scott. Historically, the report we've been going by has been very accurate.
Yeah.
So we've continued
Well,
to
the reason I
use
bring it up is because I think things are changing.
Yeah, and
There
it's
has been
something
some
for us to be
development,
aware
there has
of.
been some building, and there's more on the horizon.
And we, excuse me,
Yeah, sorry.
we had this discussion even a couple of years ago when we knew there was some new developments coming into town. We had the exact same discussion, how they can affect our pattern and how we've used this data in the past.
Doug always does a comparison to his prior year. He's done this for us each year.
So that makes
He
it
says,
self-correcting.
How close have I come in the past?
Well, I bring it up because my second question is, I see you've got almost $200,000 in reduced cost to teachers, which means you're cutting teachers.
Mhm.
And so I wondered if you could a number, and that must be a number of teachers that you're cutting, and where are they being cut, I guess?
That's not something that, the board has not made those final decisions yet. So that's something that we would be talking about.
But there's a recommendation in here, though. I wondered
Right.
how
Right,
many,
but
it was in that
There's a
recommendation.
recommendation to reduce teacher positions. We have to decide what they're going to be, and we have to have that discussion. So I guess probably during the budget process, we're going to be meeting them, we're going to have that, we'll start getting into class sizes. We'll ask the administration for their recommendations based on their knowledge of the kids.
I think class size is the core of what the school system offers. You know, and I really think it's very important that we do that. And I think this town's been shown in the past willing to pay for a great school system. I think to make bigger sizes compromises greatly. We're seeing special education costs go up, and I think that class size reflects that. You know, we see the prison population go up. Class size reflects that too. You know, this is a societal need for care, and the school system's one of the places that does that. And there's cost to it, and I'd hate to see that used to reduce the budget when I think people would be willing to pay for it.
And I agree with you. Historically, the town has supported that, and the budgets that we've had have supported that as well.
Yeah.
I mean, we've supported smaller class size compared to other towns. And we get that information and we compare our class sizes to all the towns around us.
Yeah, I'd
We're
just
always
like to point out too, if you're going to use these charts, maybe real life data might make them look a little different, which again might help with the presentation.
You guys need all the help you can get.
Well, I'm sorry, can you be a little more specific on the chart? How you-
Yeah, well, the fact that the chart is showing a 47-person drop over the next 2 years, but with new families moving into town, that might not be reflected in that, and so it might turn out to be a different number. And if the positions get cut now, and they're found to be used later, it makes things even more difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, to feed off that too, when you get into the teacher discussion thing, if you have a visual that says that Henniker class size is an average of X number of kids and other surrounding communities are X plus 5, man, that makes you feel a lot better. I mean, from sitting on this side of the table.
As the numbers decline, though, they don't do it in a way that it's even, you know. So it's something that you watch. Usually, the classes move through, right? So when you lose a large body of kids, you kind of lose them off the top, and the kindergartners come in, and so it's sort of consistent.
As they travel through the
As
grades.
they travel
Yeah.
through the grades, they're kind of consistent, so we're able to handle that. But I think you make a good point that it would be useful for the school and the town to have some sort of town and gown discussions and liaison, to talk about real numbers, to talk about how we're assessed on certain things, you know, to have that open dialogue. So. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you both.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, anything else before we move on? No. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll now move on to school board member reports, proposals for future agenda items. Does anybody have anything to add on the agenda for next meeting? Again, a big focus is going to be on the budget discussion forum that we're going to have. I don't want to load it up too much.
I really do have a question about our sewer assessment, and I did write to Cordell, and he looked at it and said it seemed high to him, looking at other municipal buildings. So I'd like to explore that more with the town, and I don't know how the board wants to proceed with that, but I think that because this is the first time it's going on the budget, the number we get assessed by the town needs to be as...
What can we ask, Jim?
Jim's been following up with, he's been asking that question to Peter for some time.
Well, I wasn't interested in voicing on the phone, but we can do it by letter. That's a more official way to do it.
To ask the selectmen.
You've been instructed by the board to inquire.
Yeah.
You know, about the formula, and that we'd also like to see how the other municipal buildings and other school, like the college, just what that formula is, so that if we get that back in January, we want to contest it in any way we could. Because I think once you get that number on the budget, it's going to be hard to get it off. And $70,000 is a lot.
So I guess you're saying if we can find, if we get any information on that, maybe we share it with them at the next meeting? Is
Yeah.
what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Put that on the agenda somewhere. Okay. That's good. Anything else? All right, then we'll move on to non-public. Thank you all. We'll be discussing
Don't forget to look into
negotiations.
those